So far in these Sadler stories, I've been recounting narratives of my involvement and enjoyment of libraries, and I did one on childhood up to age 20, and then I did one that makes a lot of sense for college, my year in between, and then graduate school. So I thought I would do one more video, and then I thought, well, how long has it been since I graduated? It's more than 2 decades. And I've been heavily involved with a lot of different libraries since then. So I'm going to tell you the story in this one of my involvement with libraries as an assistant professor at 2 different state universities. And that'll take us up to about 2011, when I would have been, 30 years old. And, 40 years old, rather. Let's try this all from the start. All right. In these Sadler Stories videos, I've already told the story of my involvement with and enjoyment of a variety of different libraries. They've been very important in my life and education and development. The first one was about childhood all the way up to age 20. And then the next one was about my undergraduate and graduate education. So we're talking about age 20 to about age 31 or so, 31, 32. And I thought, well, I'll just shoot one more and that'll be fine. But it's actually been more than 2 decades since I graduated with my PhD. And I've been using a lot of libraries in a lot of different ways since then. So in order for this video not to be an hour long, I think I'm going to just concentrate on one time period from when I had my PhD and began working as an assistant professor for Ball State University, teaching at Indiana State Prison, and then my job subsequent to that, teaching as assistant professor at Fayetteville State University in North Carolina. So we're talking about a period of about 11 years or so, and I made use of a lot of libraries and got quite involved during that time. So that's probably enough, and then we'll talk about subsequent stuff after that in a different video. So I graduate from Southern Illinois University. Obviously, I turn in all the books that I've got to the university library, and we move on to my family's land. There's a video about that, Chez Lemre's, the compound out in northwestern Indiana. And I apply for jobs, just sort of sending out CVs and cover letters to everything within a 2-hour radius of driving. Actually, it turned out, Ball State was about 2.5 hours away, so I kind of misjudged on the map. And that first semester, I got hired by Ball State to teach in their extended education prison program, which, students were working on 4-year degrees. I had to teach philosophy and religious studies classes. I ended up teaching 17 different courses while I taught for Ball State in the prison program. And that first semester, I also had 2 classes at Manchester College and 1 class for Purdue, Indiana, or Indiana University Northwest, which was actually at a local high school, professional ethics class. So that first semester, I was just like working like a dog and driving all over the place. I've actually got a video about that you can check out if you'd like to, about the drive that I used to make. 2 hours there, 2 hours back, across the Indiana countryside to get to Manchester College. And, there were some libraries that I was using for my academic research. So I would get out to Ball State University maybe twice a semester. I had to go and physically turn in my grade sheets. So that was one reason. And then, sometimes I'd go about like halfway through, or sometimes I'd go over winter break or something like that. And whenever I did that, I would go and make use of the Ball State University library. And so, I would go and I'd have like the books already sort of selected, because you could, access everything online by that point. And I'd be like, well, I need this book, this book, this book, and it'd be like a giant scavenger hunt. And I would like, go to the circulation desk, and I'd have like my arms just full of like 20 books. Some of them were doing research for my classes. I taught a world religion class, and I also taught a Jesus and the Gospel Traditions classes that required me to do a lot of boning up on things that I kind of knew a little bit about, but I needed, scholarly sources. And I was doing a lot of different research projects at the time. The work that was going into my eventual book, Reason Fulfilled by Revelation, that got published in 2011. Work on a lot of articles on Aristotle, Anselm, Hobbes, other thinkers as well. I was publishing a lot at the time, so that meant getting books from Ball State. So that was one main library. And then the other big library, the academic library that I came to use during those years was Notre Dame's Hesburgh Library. That's the one, if you've ever seen the iconic photo of Touchdown Jesus, that's the Hesburgh Library. It's a giant tower. I want to say it's got like 14 floors to it. There's like books and periodicals throughout the entire thing. And there's also a few floors that have things like the Medieval Institute, the Jacques Maritain Center. So there's some really cool stuff there. And I was teaching in Michigan City. That's where Indiana State Prison is. And that's only about maybe 45 minutes from South Bend, where Notre Dame is. So after work, I would get on the road, teaching at the prison, I'd get on the road and drive to Notre Dame. And I would use the library for, 3-4 hours, doing the research that went into that book. A lot of that was going to the stacks and looking at the periodicals. For example, the Revue de Métaphysique et Morale, right? And I was interested in this debate that took place in the 30s, but I went through everything from about 1900 to 1950, seeing what I could find in there. And sometimes I'd be tracking references down, or I'd be looking through old scholastic manuals, or all sorts of other cool stuff like that. The Revue Néo-Thomiste was also really important for those debates. And so I did a lot of photocopying. As a matter of fact, entire bankers' boxes worth of articles, sometimes on the Christian philosophy debate, sometimes on other things that I was interested in researching and writing on. So that was a real godsend to me. And the reason I had access to it was within the state of Indiana at the time, there was this vast consortium. So if you had library privileges at Ball State University, you could apply and get library privileges at Notre Dame. And, the Notre Dame library was better than any other one that I'd been in before in the extent of its holdings and the capacity to find all sorts of cool stuff. So I was there a lot, and I used those holdings as much as I could. I also had the opportunity in 2005 to be there in the summer for 2 weeks as part of a Erasmus Institute faculty fellowship led by Alistair McIntyre. So while I was there, during the daytime, we were doing the McIntyre seminar, and then, we ate with each other and all that. And then at night, I would be in the Hesburgh doing research for the Christian philosophy debates stuff and other topics as well. So, I don't know how much I spent on photocopies. It wasn't too bad, but, it was kind of an investment. And, that was an extraordinarily useful resource. I don't think I could have carried out the research that I did if it hadn't been available. And I couldn't have done it in the way that I did the research, spending lots and lots of time going through the stacks, just kind of seeing what was available, being led from one reference to another, tracking things down. So that was really quite important for me. And while I was in Indiana, I spent a lot of time at Notre Dame using that. So I had two main university libraries. Then there was the local library as well in DeMott and a few other places that we would go to. And when I say we, I mean me and at first just the one kid and then the other kid who came along. And it was very important to me as somebody who had benefited so much from libraries as a kid that my children would learn to use the library and spend time there and enjoy it. So, that was quite often what happened. By then, libraries weren't like they were when I was a kid. They had like toys for kids to play with and all of that, and activities that you could go to. I'm sure they had stuff like that when I was a kid, but we lived, kind of in the sticks, so we didn't go to those activities. But, there were a lot of fun things for Kat and then later Maddie to get to do. And, I kind of continued that throughout as best as I could when we would be on trips together, things like that, stop at libraries and see what we could see. So that leads me up to about 2008. And then, my program is ended. All of us liberal arts teachers teaching for Ball State, we're kind of out on our own as the prison program closes. And I had to get on the job market very quick. And one of the places that I did get accepted and they wanted me to work for them was Fayetteville State University down in North Carolina. So I moved down there, left my family in Indiana, and got a little apartment and started teaching there. And Fayetteville State University is a fairly small, historically black university. It's actually one of the oldest universities in the North Carolina system. Back during segregation, it was a teacher's school and professional school, and it was segregated, right? That's why it's a historically black university. And by the time that I got there, of course, segregation was long over. Fayetteville State was struggling quite a bit. We were heading right into the financial meltdown of 2008. By the time that I was there for 2 months, they'd already said, oh boy, budget is going to be frozen, no travel, no pay raises, no nothing. And so I was like, well, at least I've got a job. And I used the library quite a bit. It was a good walk across campus, but it was always nice to be in the library. And while I was there, I actually had the opportunity to apply for and get a fellowship with the library staff and some other people who were brought in. And it was a year-long fellowship to try to improve our classes by incorporating information literacy. So this was a Charles Chestnut Library Fellowship. And it was great. I worked with one of the librarians to incorporate all of these sort of principles and activities into my critical thinking classes to, kind of make them more robust for my students. And it was a great experience. And I got to say, the librarians there, they were people who really knew their stuff. Later on, I would actually give a talk during National Library Week. There's a video of it that I'll link to below about my book that came out in 2011. So, having a local author was kind of a big deal there. I do want to talk about one other academic library that was quite important for me during that time. So I did have the opportunity in the summer of 2009 to do a research residency at the Institute for St. Anselm Studies. And that meant that I got to go up to St. Anselm's College. I think I was there for about 2 weeks or so, got to participate in the metaphysics colloquium, and they put me up, gave me a dorm room, gave me a photocopy card, and access to the St. Anselm collection every single day. And so I was there at the, I want to say it's the Geisler Library on campus, and, got to know the staff really well. It was interesting, too, because subsequently, some of the staff, when we were talking about it, there's a book about my great, like, 27 times ancestor, Pierre Lefebvre, that my family has. And that was in the library, in part because they have this massive French-American collection. And it's, it's one of the books about my Quebecois, well, originally French, then, Quebecer ancestor, who later became Pierre Lefebvre de la Maryse. And so, we chatted about that because there's a lot of French people in that part of New England. Anyway, long story short, the St. Anselm collection, they try to gather everything that has been written on St. Anselm. And it's in a single room. Maybe you've seen some photos of that. I've done some videos on that before in the past. And so it was a wonderful time for me to do a lot of research on St. Anselm, but also on other related topics that I wanted, because their college library is pretty good. So, Fayetteville State University library, St. Anselm's library, those are the main academic libraries that I'm using at the time. There is one other library that played a pretty important role, and that was the Fayetteville Public Library, the Central Branch. As it turned out, my apartment was about a quarter of a mile from where the downtown started in Fayetteville. And Fayetteville's laid out kind of weird. There's an old downtown and, stuff around it, and then there's like the big sprawl that happened, which is closer to Fort Bragg. And nothing is laid out with grid patterns the way it is here in the Midwest. It's all these hub and spoke kind of streets. And sometimes the streets change their name halfway through and you're like, where the hell am I? GPS was pretty useless out there. Anyway, I could walk a lot. And so I would walk over to the Fayetteville Public Library. And that place was just a godsend for me. I was, pretty lonely for a while living there in Fayetteville because I didn't know anybody, university colleagues. It took, everything was in chaos. It took a while to get settled in. I didn't even have an office until November, and you'd never get a straight answer out of anybody. When am I actually going to get an office so I can hold office hours at some place other than, the student center? And so going to the library for me was great. There were books all over the place. They had a wonderful foreign language collection, in part, I think, because of the Fort Bragg connection. And they had a really great selection of classic sci-fi and fantasy and other speculative fiction literature. And that's when I got into Philip K. Dick. I had read The Android's Dream of Electric Sheep in the past. I'd always kind of poo-pooed Dick. People were like, oh, you got to read him, he's so philosophical. And I'd be like, well, how philosophical can he be if he's got this fan base over here? And I got those Library of America editions that have, 4 novels from this time, 5 novels from this time. And I started reading and I was like, holy crap, this is really good. And so, I just read my way through what they had available. I read a lot of Iris Murdoch at the time as well, and, some A. Van Vogt and various other authors. And so they had a great collection. And you could just wander around like you do in a library and pick stuff out. And that was quite nice for me. It was my guilty pleasure reading, you could say. But of course, libraries have more than just books. So I took out lots of DVDs from that particular library, getting to watch movies that I hadn't seen for many, many years, like the 1970s, 3 and 4 Musketeers. Originally one movie. That's the way the actors had it billed for them. And they were actually only paid for one movie until they sued. But it was broken into 2 movies, and that was, a big favorite of mine. They had all these other classic movies. And so I would, it was kind of a routine thing. I probably watched 1 or 2 movies at least a week that I would, get at the library for free and then watch on my computer monitor, because I had a DVD reader in there. I didn't have a TV or anything. And so it was, it was pretty cool to do that. And the last thing that I'll mention, and this is going to assume much greater importance when I tell the next part of the story, is that I began giving talks at libraries. And I started doing this in part because as a professor, when you're doing, you're going up for tenure and promotion, there's three main categories that they look at. One is your teaching. That's really important. And then, of course, there's your research and publishing and stuff like that. But then there's what's called service. And this includes service to the university community. And I actually did some of that with the Fayetteville State University library. I would go through their cards of possible books and be like, yeah, we could use this. We don't need this. And give them, feedback about ordering books. But service to the general public, this was viewed as particularly important because it puts the university on the map. It makes them look good. If you look good, if you screw up, it looks bad, right? And I was doing a lot of interesting research projects that, libraries would have patrons who could be interested in. So I remember I gave one talk, and unfortunately, when I tried to record it, the battery died about halfway through. So I never actually published the talk. But it was the first talk that I gave on how the 8 capital vices became the 7 deadly sins, which is, something that I've done a lot of presentations and writing about because people are very interested in the 7 deadly sins and don't realize that it came from a broader, deeper matrix. I would get invited to these local libraries to give talks, and that's when I first began doing that, and first started saying, yeah, I kind of like doing this sort of public speaking. I'd done plenty of academic presentations by then, but that wasn't the only or first thing I did for the general public. I'd done a few other things. But I think those were the first times that I was actually presenting in a library, a center of, literacy, something that's there for the public. That would become pretty big for me later on in my career. So that leads us up to about 2011 when I left Fayetteville State University. There's a long story to tell why I did that. The short answer is for love. But I'll put that off to another time. So this is the end of part 3 of what's becoming the library saga of reminiscences and memories. So I'll see you next time for what will hopefully be the wrap-up.